Hey there everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome back to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first novel. And on my channel I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of writing, and that's the characters. And the heart of the characters is their psychology. So that's the angle I like to take with pretty much everything I talk about on my channel. So today is the 4th of July, so if you guys hear any loud noises or my dog whining in the background, that would be why. The fireworks are going off right now, so he is staying in here with me, so we'll see if he decides to join us. So today I wanted to talk about another trope diagnosis. This one was actually requested by James Buchanan. I hope I'm saying your last name right, and that is the dark shepherd. So full disclosure, I actually had never heard of this trope before, but once I looked it up, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know this trope. So basically, the dark shepherd is where you have usually a hero, although apparently it can also happen with a villain, where essentially they are put in a situation where in order to get someone to do the right thing, they do morally questionable things. A good example of this is Batman. Batman does this a lot, where basically you threaten people to make the right decision. I actually really like this trope because I think it's very interesting, because I think in general morality is very interesting. I've talked about morality a little bit before on my channel. It is much more complicated than just one person having a certain set of beliefs, because your beliefs are not set. There may be certain aspects of your beliefs that are set, but they do change, and they can change over different circumstances, experiences, things like that. They actually have done a study where they've looked at basically what a society considers moral over the course of, I think it was 100 years. And there are peaks and valleys where something like, for example, purity would go from being extremely important to not considered necessarily a moral problem, and things like authority, having the absolute say, things like that. And it shifts, it changes. People are the same way. And I think that is partially what is going on when we're talking about the dark shepherd. But I think what the main thing that's going on is what I like to call conflicting morals. So let's take, for example, the overall idea of, say, Batman. So he becomes a vigilante because the governmental system in Gotham is corrupt, and it does not serve essentially justice as he sees it. So we know that he was raised by his parents and by Alfred to have this sense of righteousness and justice, and that people should be given a chance to reform. But he was also raised and experienced the corrupt nature of Gotham. So what we have here are essentially two morals that are in conflict with each other. On the one hand, he wants to follow this belief of justice and, you know, the due process of the judicial system and getting people what they deserve. But on the other hand, he has seen through experience that the corrupt nature of Gotham does not let this happen. So what he ends up doing is he takes on the role of the judicial system, even though that is very much against his first moral, which was a belief in the judicial system of Gotham, and it should not be determined by one all-powerful individual. So now you have two morals that are in conflict here. So what happens? Well, essentially one has to give out. One has to essentially succumb to the other. And when we're talking about morality with people in therapy, what we actually usually do is we have them list their values, their morals, what's most important to them, what is not. And what you will generally find is we usually have them list 1 to 10, 1 being the absolute most important thing, 10 being the least important of that list. People very rarely surrender or change their first moral. However, the further down the list you go, the more malleable the morals get. And one of these things that happens is that when people are faced with a difficult situation, sometimes they will react emotionally to it. So you make a decision based on emotion. And once that situation is over with, we justify it. Humans are experts at rationalizing anything. So in a circumstance where, say, a hero is trying to get people to do what they consider to be the right thing, what they would say is best for society, or it's a situation where it's supporting that number 1 moral they have, or maybe their number 2 moral, and they react emotionally, it is more important to them to maintain that first moral than it is to maintain the others. So the others can shift and change, and they do. The other thing that's important to remember is there's different types of morals. Like there's certain morals that I would call essentially the root morals. So these are the ones that are kind of in place over your whole viewpoint. It doesn't matter who you're with or what you're doing, they don't change. But there's other sets of morals that shift depending on your circumstance. So what would be morally acceptable in, let's say, a life or death situation is not morally acceptable in a normal everyday life situation. For example, in a normal everyday life situation, most people generally would say it's not okay to kill. In a life or death situation where you're having to decide how you're going to live through this circumstance, killing someone may suddenly become okay under those circumstances. So I think that's why I really like tropes like this, because they force you to think about morality. And I think that's one reason people like characters like Batman, because he makes you think about those kinds of things. So on the one hand, Batman is a vigilante, and that technically is against the law. But again, the viewer as well as Batman knows that the system in Gotham is corrupt, and if he was to just turn over these criminals to the justice system, it would not do any good. So in that case, is his threatening of their life to set them straight, is it justified? We don't really get an answer to it, and that's kind of the point. Really the point with these kind of Dark Shepherd moments is to make you think and make you consider and kind of put yourself in the character's shoes of, what would I do in this circumstance? And like I said, circumstances can change your morals, can change what is acceptable. And I think that's really important in a story, because your characters are going to go through change. That's the whole point of a story, is they're going to shift, and the plot is going to force them to grow. Sometimes when people grow, they surrender old morals. Sometimes the morals they have shift or morph slightly. Sometimes they gain completely new morals because they've been exposed to new experiences that expand their knowledge. So I think with the Dark Shepherd, like I said, there's lots of things going on with this. There's conflicting morals. There is changing of morals overall. There is the circumstance of what leads them to this point, because a lot of times this usually happens when the hero has tried other options. They've attempted to resolve the situation without kind of forcing their hand. And so this almost comes as a last-ditch effort kind of thing. And that's why I said what you usually will get is an emotional response that is then later rationalized. Because when your brain has a conflict, when you have two things that do not match with each other, whether it be morals, decisions, whatever, you're uncomfortable. You get anxious, you get angry, you get irritable because your brain's trying to make sense of it and it can't because they conflict. So when that happens, one of them has to change, one of them has to shift. And that's where the rationalization comes in. And like I said, humans are extremely good at rationalizing just about anything. And I think that's what happens really with the Dark Shepherd is rationalization. You know, by your character's viewpoint, what makes this okay? Why is this suddenly okay? And is it okay just for this one time? Or does it become an ongoing pattern? Because as morals shift and change, like I said, over time, society morals shift and change. They go up and down. They go back and forth. So is this a moment where your character kind of starts to go down a darker path? Is it a one-shot moment that they continue to look back on and are uneasy about? There's lots of different angles you can take with it. I think all of them are interesting. The hero suddenly going down a dark moral path, I think, is a very popular one for a reason. But I also really like the one where this is a moment that, even if they kind of rationalize it to themselves, they're not comfortable with it. They still don't like it. They may fully believe it was necessary, but that doesn't mean that they like to remember it or they don't feel that it was a terrible situation to be in. Those are interesting as well, because this teaches your audience so much about your character and what they hold dear and what's most important to them. Because like I said, that number one moral, maybe number two moral, usually doesn't shift. So depending on what moral does, you're telling us what is most important. So that's just my little delving into the Dark Shepherd trope. I hope you guys found it interesting. Thank you, James Buchanan, for the suggestion. If you guys have any comments or suggestions, be sure to leave them below. I will get to them as soon as I can. If you guys want to make sure you never miss when I upload, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell. I try to upload every Sunday, every Wednesday, with a few extra videos in there when I can. And with that being said, I hope you guys, if you're in America, have a happy 4th. Otherwise, make sure you guys stay safe, stay happy, and I will see you next time.